He's carrying whatever he can, whatever he has left. Others in this village, close to the earthquake's epicenter, still searching for missing relatives, though there's little hope they're still alive. Jamal managed to pull himself out of the rubble. Much of his family couldn't. They've already found the bodies of his sister-in-law and young nephew. Now they're looking for his brother.
I was injured. I was bleeding and I could barely get up. Everyone was saying you're hurt yourself, but I had to try and help my brother and his family.
We've travelled along dirt roads carved into the sides of mountains. We saw fresh landslides falling from our car. Bulldozers are clearing blocked paths, but the remote location of the worst affected region is making rescue and recovery efforts all the more difficult. Even ambulances struggle to pass traffic chokeholds. We arrive at the village of Talat Na Yaqub, nestled in the Atlas Mountains. Morocco has been hit by deadly earthquakes in the past, but only on a handful of occasions. People here weren't prepared for anything like this. You can see whatever's left of their possessions now strewn amongst the debris. And it's families living here in more rural, poorer communities who are suffering the most. The army has been deployed to help deliver aid and reach cut-off communities. Supplies are being rushed to locations across the affected zone, but some survivors are frustrated there's not more help.
If you think this is bad, go further up. There's nothing left. People are helping each other. The government is nowhere.
At a nearby cemetery, graves are filling up. 3 days of national mourning have been declared. Mohammed has been burying his 3 closest relatives. His mother and father earlier today. Now it's the turn of his 13-year-old brother. I live in Marrakesh, he told me. I tried to call my family here, but they didn't pick up, so I rushed here as quickly as I could. The journey was so difficult. I had to walk for parts of it. It took 14 hours to get here. The first thing we found was my father's arm. We pulled him out and buried him. What support do you want from your government, from the international community?
We don't have any home, any support, supply, food, water. Of course we need anything.
More than 2,000 people have been killed in this earthquake. Many more left homeless. The scale of this disaster is still emerging.
Well, joining me now is Samia Esseriki, who is a Moroccan-American historian of North Africa at Stanford University, who previously worked as a journalist in Morocco. Samia, thank you very much for joining us. We've just seen the latest death toll figures sadly rise. I just wanted your reaction in a country that means so much to you, to what we're seeing right now.
Thank you for having me. First, I would like to convey my condolences to families who've lost loved ones, and my support and solidarity for those that are continuing to rescue their loved ones. The reaction has been somber, has been of anger, frustration, just trying to get a sense of what's happening because of the unfortunate lack of transparency and because of the nature of the remote area, as the previous speakers have noted, that this is a situation that is dire. And unfortunately, many of us, not just those of us that are abroad, but I've spoken to family and friends that are in the country who they themselves are struggling to get a grasp and understanding of what's happening. And every 2 or 3 hours, we are just holding our breaths and waiting for the latest death count. And we're just hoping that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel of this.
Just talking about those rural areas, just picking up on reporting from Secunda there, just describe what these areas are like and how remote they are and what kind of people are living there. What resources do they have?
On a good day, Okay, so we're talking about the absence of any natural disaster just on a day-to-day basis. This region is extremely difficult to get to. The roads are hardly paved. I mean, the moment that you step out of the urban areas and centers of Marrakesh, Casablanca, Rabat, this is the picture and this is the reality that many Moroccans live. So in this particular region, in the region of Al Hawz, roads are not fully paved. Access to running water and electricity is scant, and just the basic infrastructure that one would expect in the 21st century is not a given there. And so you compound that with the reality of a tremendous and devastating earthquake. We can only imagine how difficult it will be to ensure that aid workers and officials are able to get there in a timely manner and ensure that those that need help are able to get it.
What we have seen is international help offered by the US. We've seen that reiterated in Vietnam just a little while ago. There's been help offered, but not necessarily taken. Why would that be the case?
It's a question that we all are wondering. So unfortunately, there has been an absence of Moroccan leadership. We did not get an official statement from the leaders until 20 hours after the earthquake. That is when it was announced that the king held a cabinet meeting with a number of officials to discuss immediate measures and sort of outline a plan of how to deal with the situation. 20 hours. This follows reports that were unconfirmed that he had just recently arrived from Paris. In addition to that, there has yet to be a single press conference. We have seen practically not a single Moroccan official on any media outlet answering questions, providing information, not just for the Moroccan people, but for the international community. So unfortunately, I'm ill-equipped to answer that question because I myself don't know. We can surmise and guess. There have been reports that aid workers from a few countries, some have speculated that Tunisia, Qatar have been able to send aid. But we have also seen reports from the Washington Post, for example, that cited unnamed European Union officials who said that they're simply not getting a hold of their counterparts to ensure that aid is making its way and that rescue workers are able to get there. So the situation is surrounded by opacity, unfortunately.
And Samia, that's a situation that we're going to be keeping a close eye on. Thank you.
We begin with this story this hour. A deadly earthquake in Morocco has now claimed over 2,000 lives. The 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck the North African country on Friday. Rescuers continue their search through the rubble for survivors. It is the deadliest earthquake to hit the region in decades. Correspondent Alex Kader is in the city of Marrakesh in Morocco and joins us for the very latest on this tragedy. A very good afternoon to you, Alex, and thank you for joining us. Let's perhaps start with what the update would be at this hour when it comes to the search and recover, search or rescue mission that is currently underway after that earthquake.
Well, you've got two phases, two facets of this operation. As you can see, the buildings in Marrakesh behind me have been damaged by the earthquake, but the extent of the damage here is relatively limited. It's very much about fixing this mosque, which locals tell me is about 150 years old, and fixing the walls and the historic heritage sites around Marrakesh that have been damaged as well. So that's one aspect, of course, but if you push a bit further out of Marrakesh, about an hour or 2 hours south of here, then you get into rural areas, mountains, very hard to reach areas. Now that is much more tricky. Authorities, I'm told, have completed clearing most of the roads to these small villages, but they are digging through the rubble and trying to evacuate people and trying to save lives wherever they can. So that will be the more challenging aspect. That work is ongoing as quickly as they can to get to people in those remote areas, while meanwhile here in Marrakesh they are repairing their heritage and repairing their old buildings. But certainly the concern will be for those people in those mountain towns, in those remote areas, very hard to reach and certainly very challenging for rescuers.
We have confirmed that just over 2,000 people have been confirmed dead. Do you have an update on further deaths that have been recorded, or is this going to be something that you'll probably get a little later on?
That's the latest number we have at the moment, but it is likely to change. As I said, authorities have only just reached some of those very, very remote villages in the last couple of hours, and so that death toll, I'm told, is likely to go up. By how much is hard to tell. The main region that was hit has a population of about 500,000 people, and in that region alone, 500 people are confirmed to have lost their lives. So that gives you an idea of the scale for just one of those regions. But again, you have villages with 200, 300, 400 people living in them, up mountains, up very narrow roads to get there, so it's hard to confirm. The likelihood is, once they clear the rubble, they may find some survivors, but unfortunately they may also find people who have lost their lives. So the expectation is certainly that that number, that death toll, will continue to rise in the next few hours and days.
And what have you heard, Alex, about the displaced people or communities in the region, and what the plan is for the local government to place them in some form of community centre while they find them alternative accommodation? Are there any plans that you've heard are being made on the ground?
Yeah, that's actually a very relevant question for Marrakesh, because it is the biggest city near the worst affected areas of the disaster. And so we know that the Moroccan military is putting up a field hospital here to bring in any patients who need medical or emergency medical treatment. We also know that up the mountains in these rural areas, they're setting up camps for people who are displaced and who have been had to leave there and evacuate their homes. They will be able to find shelter. But another thing to say is that those who haven't lost their homes are also too worried to go back. They say, we don't feel comfortable, we don't feel like our old houses will be able to withstand an aftershock, for example. So if you drive around the streets of Marrakesh, you will see thousands of people trying to find any patch they can, a little park, a little bit of grass, or even in petrol stations, sleeping out in the streets because they don't feel safe in their homes. And they say at the moment, because their houses haven't been affected, there is not much support for them. But there is a sense of community, a sense of solidarity among people here in Marrakesh, but certainly a lot of people not comfortable yet and not sure when they'll be able to go home.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we've got the visuals on air for our viewers to see at the moment, Alex, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier, the infrastructure in that region really needing some work, and of course government doing its bit. One assumes that the mop-up operation here is going to be not only a costly one, but an important one to establish infrastructure that perhaps does not look or resemble what it currently did before that earthquake, just for the safety and resilience of the infrastructure in Marrakesh.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And actually, if you look at the mosque behind me, it's about 150 years old. And the last time Morocco had an earthquake of this magnitude and of this force was about 120 years ago. So it's certainly not something that's habitual, not something that is regular. And you speak to locals and they say, look, there is not the kind of buildings you see in places, for example, like Japan, that are regularly exposed to earthquakes. Morocco isn't built for this, and so there's going to be a lot of reconstruction. We've also heard from UNESCO, who said they're putting a plan in place to help rebuild some of the heritage sites. Morocco has a lot of ancient and beautiful monuments, especially here in Marrakesh, including the red walls around the city that were also damaged. So that will be very meticulous work in rebuilding. Another line from the Red Cross is that it will take years to fully rebuild everything that was lost, rebuild those lives, rebuild the infrastructure, as you quite rightly said. So at the moment, it is about that initial short-term disaster response, trying to find survivors, trying to make sure that people don't lose their lives. But you're absolutely right to point out that the full rebuild will almost certainly take years.
And you've now mentioned UNESCO, which has said that it will assist with the rebuilding of the historical buildings there and, of course, preserve whatever legacy is left. But are there any other organizations, NPOs and the like, that are not necessarily part of government that are going to perhaps assist with bare necessities like water and food?
Yeah, there will definitely be that. The Red Cross has been here. The Red Crescent will also be intervening. Other groupings from the Middle East have said that they will intervene by giving money, by giving goods, by helping out with resources wherever possible. So that is going to be a big concern. A lot of different organizations stepping in, a lot of different NGOs, but will be coordinated by the government in Morocco, which we've seen taking a bit of time to ask for help. There is also a sense from the Moroccan government, the Moroccan royal family in particular, that this country can deal with most of it by itself. Now that is changing slowly. They are requesting help from NGOs and from other countries, but at the moment it is about that disaster response, and the rebuild will take years and will require expertise from all over the world.
And just a final one from you, Alex, if you can. You did mention that it's rather unusual for Morocco to have experienced an earthquake of this nature. Might it have anything to do with the climate change crisis that the world is facing at the moment? And does it perhaps heed a louder call to global leaders to focus more on the changing landscape of the climate and its implications?
Well, it's probably too early to tell if there was a direct link between the earthquake itself and climate change more generally. But what is true is that actually a lot of the regions that were hardest hit were drought-stricken regions that had a real issue with drought, which we know there has a link to the changing climate and will want to be a part of that broader conversation. These regions that are not particularly wealthy, not particularly well off, relying very heavily on agriculture, that relies, of course, on a water supply which wasn't there. The other point to say is that in that region there were 2 dams in the hills that were saving water to feed water to the city of Marrakesh and the surrounding areas. Thankfully, those dams are still intact, but the drought that affected that region is certainly a concern for years to come.
Thank you very much for that update, Alex, and of course you will continue to keep us abreast of those developments as they unfold. Alex Kadia there joining us from Marrakesh in Morocco, giving us an update on that earthquake and the casualties, but also the mop-up operations that are set to ramp up over the next few hours.